So sermons, as I told you during the holidays, that I said that sermons come in many different ways, and I wrote the letter to my kids instead of kind of a formal sermon. So sermons are also shaped in many different ways. So if this were a sandwich, what would you call it? Would it be a hoagie, which represents a sub, which represents some of where you are? Would you call it anything else? A what? A panini? No, panini is the squished thing that's on the... Okay, you would call it a panini. Okay. Wow. That's a hero. That's a good one. Right, okay. Great, you're all wrong, but it's... So before I move deeper into the talk, I want to recognize Dave and Jackie Levine. Dave... May his memory be for a blessing, Zichrono Livracha, that Dave and Jackie were longtime sponsors of this festivity, which was created by our own Rabbi Rudolph, with the idea that Zman Simchatenu, we should just have more joy, like Rabbi Megdal spoke about yesterday, for no other reason than this is a joyous time, and so why not? Let's have Deli on the second day, and it has caught. And we have been doing this for, I don't know, a decade or so maybe even longer than that. Much longer. Okay, so a long time. But unlike the finest brine or the choicest first cut brisket, little in this talk should be taken seriously. Do not confuse the few facts with the boundless opinions flavoring this talk. But whether your preferred deli order is pastrami or tongue or turkey, and I will give a nod to the vegetarians in our midst, so that the deli culture is our lifeblood and cholesterol clogging the life of America. So I want to make sure you realize that preparing for this deli sermon is a tall order. Only an exclusive group of individuals have had the honor of delivering this sermon, and it requires the right balance of scholarship, which is very little, and being an experienced nosher, which I have a lot of experience doing. Rabbi Rudolph, of course, gave this many, many times. Oh, yes. Because there's the Impossible Burger. Yeah. So I saw what you did there. Right. Chazan Matt Klein offered it. Rabbi Rami Schwartzer. Rabbi Fabian Werbin. Dave Levine himself, a fresser extraordinaire, offered it this sermon one time. A ringer was brought in, Ted Merwin, the author of the award-winning book Pastrami on Rye, An Overstuffed History of the Jewish Deli. It was actually true. That's all true. That is his book. And the Chazan has already offered himself for next year's talk as well. So we're looking forward to that. But until you get to the good sermon next year, you are stuck with mine. And by my count, this is the third time I have given this illustrious, scrumptious, and gluttonous deli sermon. You may recall the stories of Bruce Ross, the inventor of Lipitor, and his many parallels to Rabbi Rudolph. I talked about one year from Philadelphia and Ann Arbor. There were many, you didn't cross paths, but you were in the same places. Or regaling you with stories of the Jewish deli of my youth, Brothers Delicatessen, owned by a Korean family. While those talks may have stayed with you like the unforgiving smell of sauerkraut that has been in the back of the fridge a little too long, today is a time for redemption from those past errors, frivolity, and of course, deli. So, like any decent deli meal, let's start off with a side of pickles. I mentioned preparing this delicacy of delight, this trilogy of taste, this bewitching bliss, this portage of palate pleasures requires research. So for your benefit, I did. This summer, Sarah and I were on a road trip, and along the way, we stopped in New Paltz, New York. I mentioned aspects of this trip before. This is the walkway across the Hudson that I talked about and the statue of Sojourner Truth. This was the same trip. And New Paltz is a great little town. It's very artsy. There's SUNY New Paltz, the Montauk Mountain Resort, which we did not stay at, super fancy. Lots of hiking and head shops, and Frank's Fresh Pickling Company. It's right on Main Street in New Paltz. When we saw the sign, I knew we had to explore it. It was closing time, but there were a few people still in the shop, so we were welcomed in. And you know who was working the counter at Frank's Fresh? Frank himself was there. So let me tell you something about Frank's Fresh. And I know it is true because we talked to him, and I pulled this from his website. So like a rock star, that seems to come out of nowhere, but has been building their career for the past 20 years, the brick and mortar realization of Frank's Fresh has been an evolution. Frank will tell you, but of course he told us none of this stuff, that his cooking career began when he was 7 years old and too hungry to wait for someone else to make his breakfast eggs. And it continued when his siblings insisted that his sandwiches just tasted better. But in terms of cooking in the hospitality industry, Frank's roots were planted here in New Paltz. Chances are, if you've lived or visited New Paltz in the last 20 years, you've eaten something prepared by Chef Frank. One summer, when his garden was particularly rich with cucumbers and peppers, he started experimenting with hot sauces and pickles. When his co-workers began raving about them, he got serious about it. Relish and sauerkraut and kimchi were the next recipes he perfected. And jam was just for fun until the rest of his family started asking for it on a regular basis. In fact, Frank's 6-year-old daughter, Lily, fell on the floor dramatically after tasting the first batch of peach nectarine jam. And at the urging of his family and friends, Frank formalized his practice, and Frank's Fresh was born. So a deli counter was on the right with a limited selection of sandwiches available. Each sandwich or panini or wrap highlighted a pickled indulgence. Rustic bookcases lined the wall directly in front of us as we walked in, and the shelves held jars of habanero garlic dill pickles, as well as kosher dill. Containers of pickled radishes and others with pickled red onions were tastefully displayed. And jams and hot sauces and sweet bell peppers were also available, and plenty of cool-looking t-shirts and hats and mugs for purchase as well. We chatted with Frank for a bit and left with the habanero garlic dills and some marinated mushrooms. The next day, we continued our drive and stopped at a farmer's stand just on the New York-Vermont border. Lo and behold, they also had pickles. Well, the pickle-off contest was born. The rest of the trip was amazing, but I don't want to get distracted by the side salads of adventures we had. When we got back to Bethesda, friends gathered in my backyard for a taste test of 4 specialty pickles. Some were widely available, and others, like Frank's Fresh Pickling Company of New Paltz, New York, which is not a sponsor of today's Drosh, were artisanal. And my mouth is watering just thinking about the spices and the flavors and the heat these curated cucumbers rendered. While I could marinate in the experiences of these pickled presents, I must remember that the pickle-off is just the appetizer to the main course of my talk. So I have mitzvahs to discuss and pastrami to dream about. So I have told you about Frank, but now let me tell you about Steve Goody. Steve appreciates the open road, a big hog, a Jewish deli, and a good cause. Intrigued? Let's order it up. So the hog I am talking about is not from Charlotte's Web or is even Trafe. It's a motorcycle. And for full disclosure, Steve did not actually ride a Harley in his adventure, but it fits with my sermon better. So again, this is from Steve's blog, so it must be true. Steve wrote, After many years of riding motorcycles and embarking on 3 major cross-country motorcycle rides, I've decided to blend my passion for motorcycle adventures with my involvement in the Jewish community to help take on the most spiritually rewarding ride yet, the Great American Deli Schlep. It's a thing. Steve came across a list on Nosher, which I guess is a website, Jewish food website, mapping the best Jewish deli in every state. And he says, my wheels started turning, literally and figuratively. Who wouldn't want to go on the ultimate deli motorcycle trip? And after discussing this new idea with my wife, she suggested I reach out to Mazon. And so my next adventure was born, he says. 16,000-mile, 75-day journey to delis across the country, supporting Mazon and raising awareness about hunger in the U.S. Steve said, I'm motivated and encouraged by Mazon's dedication to ending hunger amongst people of all faiths and backgrounds. Planning this trip has taught me so much about about the persistence of the hunger crisis that so many people face. And since COVID-19 began, food insecurity has doubled. 80 million Americans face food insecurity today, unsure of where their next meal will come from. I'm hopeful, he says, that the Great American Deli Schlep will help amplify the conversation about hunger in America, and I'm eager to start the dialogue with communities who are unaware of its scope and magnitude. Let me also add a side note here that I will match any donations made to Mazon following this sermon. So if you're motivated by the Great American Deli Schlep, then make a donation to Mazon and let me know, and I will match it on behalf of Bethel and you. So on June 1st, 2021, right, just a couple months ago, so the Deli Schlep just happened this summer. It's fresh. Exactly. On June 1st, 2021, Chicago area motorcyclist Steve Goody embarked on a new cross-country motorcycle journey of his own. The trip started at Manny's Deli, a Chicago staple. And from there, Goody started heading east before he looped south, west, north, and finally headed home again. This is from Steve's blog on his first day on the road, June 1st, 2021. I hope that through this blog you will feel as if you are riding along with me on a gastronomical mega journey. I started this trip at Manny's Deli since it is my Chicago hometown deli. We had a crowd of 30-plus people consisting of friends, family, and fellow Jewish riders. It was a beautiful 72 degrees with an abundance of sunshine. This was an ideal day to begin the ride, a long row of bikes assembled in front of the entrance to Manny's Deli. We parked the bikes and then we gathered in back of the Mazon banner and took a group photo. With the phone cameras clicking and the press taking their video, I left the group to begin the interviews that were scheduled with both Fox and ABC News. We were greeted by Dan Raskin, the third-generation owner of Manny's Deli. I have to give him a lot of credit for figuring out how to survive during COVID. After gorging ourselves on corned beef sandwiches and potato pancakes, it was time to head out to the second deli, Shapiro's, in Indianapolis. The highways were packed, which required 100% of my attention to traffic. The good news is I've done this before and know some tricks of the trade. So I will say Steve's blog was actually fun to read. He has pictures of each deli along the way. It's himself and the motorcycle, the deli owner holding a large banner for the Great American Deli Schlep and Mazon. And sometimes there are fellow riders who have joined him from his trip and friends he's made along the way. Steve shares some great experiences in the blog and helps raise money and awareness about an important issue, the Jewish response to hunger in America. Now, I know you want to hear which delis he went to. It's an impressive list of 42 delis in 75 days. It's funny, on the first day blog, he lists his cholesterol level, his weight, his blood pressure. But I didn't notice on the last day blog what the comparison was. So, okay, so raise your hand if you've been to some of these. I'm not listing all 42. So raise your hand if you've been to Manny's in Chicago. Really? Adam Ducker, okay. Strong start. Okay, Shapiro's in Indianapolis. No. Steve's in Louisville. Right? I know, these are tough ones. He was going deep on this list. Okay, but just I want you to feel good about yourself, so I threw one in here that definitely people have been to. Have you been to Zingerman's in Ann Arbor? Of course. Corky and Lenny's? That's one that's been listed before, right? Cleveland, exactly. Okay, Bubby's in Providence? No? Is that kosher? RA's got family in Providence, so unlikely, yes. So, okay, Jerome's in Manchester, New Hampshire. Okay, here's another one I threw in that's on the list, but I know that we're going to get many hands here. Rosenfeld's in Rehoboth. What? Really? You never just stop there for a bagel? I think it's like right on Route 1 there, whatever. Okay. Atman's in Baltimore? Right? Okay. Really? Only a few here. No, that's true. But have you ever been? It doesn't mean you have to eat trafe when you go there, right? Okay. Here's one. This was a standard when I was doing my undergraduate at AU. Wagshaw's. Anyone been to Wagshaw's? Right, okay, excellent. This is not as much of a deli crowd as I thought, or maybe you're more pious than I gave you credit for. That is, I will choose to look at it that way. Okay, well, here's one that I threw in just because I like the name. Noshville in Nashville. That's a good one. Okay, this I think, Rebecca, this is for you. Kenny's and Ziggy's in Houston. Yeah, oh, okay, Henry also. And the last one, because you also have St. Louis connections now, Protzel's Deli. Oh, Gail, tell us about Protzel's.
It's a bakery.
Oh, it's a bakery. Off the list. Off the list. I'm going to write Steve Goody and tell him.
It was a bakery in 1977.
Oh, so maybe they've expanded from a bakery in 1977, but maybe they've expanded it. So, okay. So Steve's blog, he shows also, of course, the food that he eats at each place. And the list of delis is extensive. So on August 14th, Steve completed the schlep. And here is part of his final blog. On Saturday morning, about 12 riders and their bikes met me in a parking lot near our homes, and we began to make our way up the tri-state tollway into Milwaukee, arriving without incident right on time at 11:30 from my last deli. It was a bittersweet arrival. I was definitely ready to hang up the helmet for now, but I knew I would miss the adventure, meeting new people, eating the traditional deli food, and of course, the riding itself. What I didn't know about Jake's Deli is that it's owned by Bud Selig. Has anyone been to Jake's Deli? Yeah? No? Oh, but you know Bud Selig. Well, this is where he eats. This is what he does now that he has time. So, of course, Bud Selig was the former commissioner of baseball. There's actually a sandwich named after him called the commish, which is 3 to 4 pounds of meat on a loaf of bread. But Steve said that's not what he ordered that day. So after a ton of photos and conversations, it was time to ride back home. The final 60 miles were calm and relatively easy. He says I was accompanied by a few of my friends and fellow riding buddies. As I was exiting the tri-state tollway at Lake Cook Road, I gave them a final farewell wave. Another couple of miles and I cruised into my driveway, having logged precisely 14,732 miles over 75 days. It felt surreal to be back home after so many encounters with so many different people across our country. As I think back on my adventure, I hope that I've been able to highlight the plight of the hungry in our country and in Israel, and the importance of organizations such as Mazon, who are working towards trying to end food insecurities. I've enjoyed being a goodwill ambassador to so many people in the name of Mazon. I've discovered pockets of Jewish communities and places that I never even imagined, and enjoyed hearing about the creative ways they're trying to survive and create community. I've eaten the most amazing deli food with sandwiches too big for one hand to hold, and I've seen the devastation of the fires out west, experienced torrential and dangerous rain and storms, and ridden in extreme heat. Most of all, though, I met wonderful people who heard about the schlep and came out just to greet me at their neighborhood delis. The bikers from the various JMA clubs, which I'm making up is the Jewish Motorcycle Associations or something, but we can make up any other initials you want, right? But I'm going with the JMA clubs who came out to support me, friends and family from all corners of the country who also came out to support me, and owners of delis who sat with me and told me the family history of their restaurants, and strangers who became friends and opened their homes to host me for an evening or two, and who wined and dined me and filled my days and evenings sharing their stories. We live in a diverse country of many faiths and cultures, geographies, and languages, Steve writes. Somehow, though, we remain united. I feel fortunate to have been given the chance to experience the many flavors of our country through some of the best delis in 42 states. As the old saying goes from William Cowper's poem, variety is the very spice of life that gives it all its flavor. So the great American deli schlep is now complete, its mission fulfilled, and this writer, he says, is in need of some intense relaxation and sleep. And this seems like a good place to stop this sermon as well. I shared about my pickle-off competition, which brought me to farm stands and pickle proprietors. From the pickle proprietors? Oh, the habanero from Frank's is crazy hot and delicious. So absolutely. So you can go to, I have the website someplace in here, since I have footnotes in my own talk here, yes. But if you just go to freshfranknewpulse.com, you can order, they will ship it to you. So yes, and the habanero garlic pickle is crazy good. But let me go back to the pickle proprietors, right? And Steve Goody told us about the great American deli schlep to raise awareness for Mazon. So do not forget that I will match any donation to Mazon that you make following this sermon. So just let me know that you listened to the sermon and the amount that you have given. We are blessed to have plenty. So let's increase our joy by helping others who are in need. That is a great way to make this truly a Zman Simchatenu. Chag Sameach.